with the echocardiographic reports I get. And I either do it myself, or I have my own echocardiographer doing a detailed evaluation before a result can be made out. It's a rather harsh comment on the echocardiograph availability. More number of machine, very few trained echocardiographer, and this is the bounden responsibility of institutes to see that the senior residents, people doing diploma and degree, or DM and DNB, are adequately trained and spend time. Each echocardiography needs about 20 minutes to do a detailed evaluation. There is no shortcut to success, and there is definitely no shortcut to a good echocardiographic evaluation. That's what I would say.
Exactly. Dr. Arun, you...
Very well said, sir. Oh, I agree entirely. Of course, the most definitive evaluation of LV function, as Dr. Bali has already said, is by Muga scan. But that is available in few places. That is not commonly available. So a good echo by an experienced echocardiographer is the only answer. And I think Dr. Bali has put it very well.
And put it very straight way. So, Doctor, we have another question from Dr. Ankit. Hello, Ankit here. Thank you for being here. Hey, great talks as by all the experts. Thank you. Always a pleasure to listen. Dr. Bali, Dr. Arun, Dr. Vanita, it is for you people. Patient class 1, ejection fraction 35%, monomorphic VPCs, and 1 run of non-sustained VT. How should we approach such kind of patient? Class 1 patient, ejection fraction 35%, monomorphic VP, and 1 run of non-SVT. Dr. Vanita, you want to take it?
Thank you, Dr. Arun.
Yeah.
So ejection fraction 35%, what is the reason for that? We have to rule out, we have to focus on that first, whether it is a CAD or it is a non-ischemic cardiomyopathy. If it is CAD, we have to take care of the ischemia part. In case the ischemia is taken care of, angioplasty or surgery is done, depending upon what the coronary artery status is, then these VPCs loads will decrease and the non-sustained VT does not have any value. You have to re-evaluate the patient 40 days after having revascularized the patient. In case it is a non-ischemic cardiomyopathy, then 35% is actually ejection fraction where we are it is the most controversial ejection fraction. If it is less than 30% non-ischemic cardiomyopathy, we know we have to give an ICD. In case it is 35% and patient is asymptomatic class 1, probably putting these patients on medical therapy, a good medical therapy, beta blockers, ACE inhibitors or ARBs and aldosterone, you maybe give combination of this thing and following up that patient is going to be a good idea. There is no indication in non-ischemic cardiomyopathy at 35% that patient requires, asymptomatic patient requires a ICD as of now. So, sir, you want to add anything? This is what my thinking is, Dr. Bali.
Dr. Arun?
I think this is very well taken. And there are 3 drugs in the medical management arm which are approved for reducing the risk of sudden cardiac arrest. As Vanita has just alluded to, these include beta blockers, mineralocorticoid antagonists, and the newly available ARNI or sacubitril valsartan combination. So all these 3 drugs have independent data showing a reduction of sudden cardiac arrest. In fact, there is one trial with ARNI which shows that the incidence of non-sustained VT and appropriate VT shocks in patients who are given ICD reduce significantly if they also are started on ARNI. Therefore, I think this is a patient who needs good drug therapy and needs to be followed up if it is non-ischemic cardiomyopathy especially, and hopefully with good medical therapy this patient can have improved LV function and improved prognosis without a need for ICD. I agree very much with what you say, Dr. Vanita.
Dr. Bali sir, you want to add something or?
I agree completely. Now there is some more data coming with another group of drugs, dapagliflozin.
Yeah, right.
That also reduces sudden cardiac death and has additional benefit on top of these 3 group of drugs. Although it's not approved by FDA as yet, But in coming months and years, we will see SGLT2 also becoming a drug of choice in patients with heart failure, irrespective of the fact whether they have diabetes or don't have diabetes, because results were seen as well in non-diabetic patients. So I think we have a number of drugs. We need to stabilize patient, and we should give them a sufficient time to wait, and then think of an ICD. There are a number of reversible reasons also which cause left ventricular dysfunction, and we should evaluate, especially if a history is short, of less than 6 months. We should aggressively investigate them for any reversible cause for heart failure. And if after optimum medical treatment, which should include all these group of drugs, we still have ejection fraction less than 35%, and patient is symptomatic, then definitely we should consider an ICD.
Yeah, I feel the way the new medications are coming up, maybe the indications, guidelines for inserting an ICD may slightly change in coming times. Let us see how it turns out to be. Dr. Raman Chawla sir has also been here. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And thank you very much, sir. Excellent talks. My basic concept is that to prevent the sudden cardiac death, we should basically prevent the LV dysfunction. Then why not to stress equally or more on primary angioplasty so as to prevent LV dysfunction? Need comment from experts. So obviously primary angioplasty, Dr. Chawla sir is here, so 100% plasty is to be done and primary is to be done. So there's no doubt about it. And I feel none of the experts will disagree with that, comment and your suggestion. Dr.
Did you say
Bali,
time is muscle, muscle is time?
Absolutely, there is nothing better than preventing.
exactly.
And primary angioplasty done in a time frame sometimes can abort a heart attack. And
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Everybody of us knows,
Absolutely.
the longer we wait, more left ventricular dysfunction will set up. So primary angioplasty at the earliest, or if not available, then at least pharmacoinvasive treatment to take care of a heart attack is absolutely essential. We are facing these problems now in the COVID era because of effect of COVID on the heart. So we are seeing some MIs which may have with thrombotic occlusions or flowing arteries. So that is that. Besides that, but there we cannot take away from timely intervention, either mechanical or by pharmacological method, to open up the clogged artery. Earlier we do, better it is. If we're using thrombolytic treatment, it can be done in the pre-ambulance period or in the ambulance as well. So time is of great essence, and we are now seeing patients who are coming late after a particular group of maybe a couple of days, and we are seeing complications which we had not seen for the last 18 to 20 years. We are seeing cardiac rupture, we're seeing VSD, and we are seeing severe LV dysfunction. So timely intervention is the primary treatment of patients with acute MI, and that is the gospel truth. And the other thing which we need to see is that what we call as the O trial. If the patient has that MI and has, you look at the coronary and the coronary is completely occluded, and then after a few days, it's obviously not going to make a huge difference. But if it is a multivessel disease, or you have recurrent chest pain, or if you have inducible ischemia, or you have a viable myocardium demonstrated on scan, then obviously you would like to revascularize them. So revascularization plus medical management plus, if required, ICD is the way to go forward.
Dr. Bali and Dr. Arun, I have a related query, not actually, since Dr. Bali sir has talked about the COVID era, and there has been some, something in the literature that the incidences of the cardiac coronary artery disease has decreased during this COVID era. How is it the late presentation, or people don't present, or it is a real picture that the incidence of coronary artery disease has decreased? ACS, acute coronary syndrome, has decreased in this COVID times, because it has been circulating, in all the WhatsApp groups and other things. Because indirectly, what it claims that we were overdoing with the things, we were overdoing in the cath lab. The message goes like this, but I want to just get your opinion from experts. Is it that way, or there is something different? As Dr. Bali sir has said, we are seeing the newer complications, the complications which are totally avoidable in acute situations if we intervene in the early stage of acute MI. And if we don't intervene, the people are coming with the mechanical complications. Is it the delayed presentation, or is it the fact that the coronary artery disease ACS has decreased during the COVID times?
Dr. Arun, please.
Okay, sir, I'll take this. See, there are reasons because of which, for some time, maybe coronary syndromes decrease somewhat. Part of it could be reduction in pollution, reduction in stress, lack of availability of smoking and alcohol and such like things, and the fact that everybody thought that stress is somewhat less because everybody is in the same boat. It's not as if one person is losing money or another isn't. Everybody is. So that was, I think, a very, very brief period in which this was functional. Largely, it is a matter of delayed presentation, avoidance of presentation, and then once they present to the hospital, avoidance of admission and management. In fact, we are seeing this at all levels. More people are getting admitted in their nearby, small town nursing homes or with private practitioners rather than going to bigger hospitals, because people feel that in bigger hospitals there will be COVID patients and there will be greater risk of getting COVID. So people are avoiding going to bigger hospitals. Even when they come to the emergency, we find that they are not so keen to get admitted, or if they get admitted, they are not keen to get angio done. If they get angio done, they are not keen to get surgery done. So you see, there is resistance at every level. And this is probably what has converted into a lesser presentation of ACS, MI and strokes to hospitals. However, what has happened is the ones who are coming are sicker. They have more complications. They present late, usually after 24 to 48 hours, when they have severe ongoing chest pain or have developed pulmonary edema or shock, or they present with arrhythmias. And that is why, or they present with mechanical complications like cardiac rupture or VSD. And that's why what we find is that though the number of MIs who are coming are less, they are sicker, they need more treatment, and they tend to do worse. So their morbidity, mortality tends to increase, their cost of treatment tends to increase. And this is what I think we have been seeing in the last few months. Now, of course, both COVID emergencies and non-COVID emergencies have increased. So now both groups of patients are coming. But I think these were some of the reasons, some of the factors because of which cardiac emergencies had sort of decreased over the first 2 or 3 months of this pandemic. And I hope the other experts agree or may have any other ideas. Please tell me.
I think I fully agree with the very detailed explanation, as always, by Dr. Arun. Only one additional factor which I like to make is that small nursing homes, single center clinics, and other centers in peripheries, sub-districts and smaller areas, they used to play a very major role in diagnosing at least ST segment elevation myocardial infarction, because that is the first point of contact. So ECG would detect an ST segment elevation, and then the rest of the journey would start. Now, during this COVID time, many of these smaller centers on their own are under the pressure of government, had closed down. So even if the patient had chest pain, stuttering angina or some chest pain, the ECG, there was nobody to do the ECG. So unless they had prolonged chest pain or they had persistent symptoms where they could go to a hospital, that initial contact was being lost. So that is one reason which I feel we were not diagnosing or seeing so many of MIs, or at least acute coronary syndrome. So with more opening of these nursing homes and clinics, probably we'll be back to square one. As far as pollution, smoking and stress playing a role, that has been what all of us would tend to believe worldwide, whether we look at Italy or you see the opinion from TCT. What the problem with that is that such a risk factor reduction would take time for manifestation. it won't be immediate. If we have pollution going down or stress level going down, it will take weeks to months before a positive impact would come. But having said that, we do understand that stress or a final event does play a role in a vulnerable plaque or a stable plaque becoming vulnerable and rupturing. So we may be having, because of these factors, less of ruptured plaques or vulnerable plaques. But I think for a prolonged defect to have, this risk factor would need to be present for a longer period of time than what the impact we saw in the initial few months.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Raman has a question. Dr. Arun, how important is it to screen family members of non-ischemic sudden cardiac death patients?
Oh, yes, that is very well said. And see, for hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, of course, family screening is a very important part of the management. For the channelopathies, which we did not discuss because of paucity of time, again, family history is very relevant and needs to be addressed. Even in non-ischemic DCM, family history is less common, but is described. So perhaps a brief, history at least is merited to make sure that no other member of the family has a significant arrhythmic problem. However, for HCM and for the channelopathies, of course, there is no doubt that family screening is very important. In fact, family history is one of the most important predictors of risk of sudden cardiac arrest and is part of all guidelines in deciding who needs ICD and who can be followed up. So that's very well taken.
Dr. Vanitha, Dr. Raman sir has a question for you also, because you have discussed the CPR. So they need to certainly. Also, it is felt that there is no role of mouth-to-mouth respiration for bystander CPR. Just start adequate chest compressions. Any comments upon that? Whether we need the sequence of ABC has changed to some ACB or something like that
In
the recent
2015,
guidelines.
the guidelines in 2015 have actually taken out mouth-to-mouth respiration, because they found that there was a lot of inhibition in starting CPR by people who were the bystanders, because they would not want to give mouth-to-mouth respiration. Hence, they found that giving chest compressions alone is actually equivalent to the CPR which is done by two people or by a single person, giving respiratory breathings also along with it. Hence, it has been taken out of the guidelines. So now all they say is that you have to give 100 compressions in a minute. The compressions should be effective. It should be really effective. You should let the chest recoil back so that the heart is being compressed properly. But mouth-to-mouth respiration, is right. It is out of the guidelines now.
Thank you, Dr. Vanitha. Dr. Bhatia has a question. In chronic kidney disease with low GFR, with ejection fraction less than 35%, is ICD an appropriate choice? I feel this is already answered.
I think what we need to understand is that renal failure is a treatable condition, or at least manageable condition, whether with long-term dialysis or kidney transplant. So we are not talking here of a life expectancy of less than 1 year. And we should follow the same criteria. And many of these people have coronary artery disease as a cause of left ventricular dysfunction, but rarely you might see other causes of low ejection fraction in them also. In most of the studies, including some of them carried by us in PGI, showed that kidney patients die because of cardiac problem rather than because of kidney failure per se. So we need to be aggressive with them, with revascularization and with the other modalities of treatment, medicines as well. And with ejection fraction less than 35% after taking care of the reversible component, after adequate medical management, we should be willing to give them an ICD, because we are looking for moderate to long-term survival.
Dr. Vivek has a question. He says that the patients, they have, because of the economic restraint, most of the people can't afford the ASCD. So how effective is pharmacotherapy in management of such patients? So I feel we have already discussed it.
Why do we always come to the cost of ICD? I don't understand. What is the cost of life? if I may ask, whoever has asked the question.
Yeah, Dr. Vivek, he is one of my colleagues here and very dear friend.
Yeah, and what is the cost of life? Dr. Pawan, for you, what is the cost of life? Dr.
See,
Arun, for you? Yes, Dr. Pawan, please.
Dr. Arun will.
No, you say, Dr. Pawan. What is the cost of life?
See, the cost of life, if especially in these COVID times, the cost of life is dramatically, everybody is, the
Everybody
cost of
wants to
life is
live.
altogether changed. I tell you sincerely and frankly, the COVID has tested all the human beings and it has made us realize that there is no match for life.
Exactly.
Exactly.
So whenever somebody puts the cost of ICD, in front of me to say that we can't afford ICD, I don't understand. You can afford everything else, but you can't afford an ICD. A single chamber ICD is 3.5 to 4 lakhs. I mean, I don't understand why can't we can get a, anyway, I will not go to that. I will ask my question. When are you giving me time to ask the question, please?
Yes, we have 4 or 5 questions, ma'am, because your question was not in schedule. So you have to wait.
I think adding to what Dr. Vinita said, when we talk about cost of life, we should be very clear that we are talking of long term, and we have to take into consideration the cost of medicine as well. The other important factor is we as Indians must start investing in our health, whether it means taking insurance
Perfect.
or whether taking care of our health. That would be add on. And if we have at this moment, the penetration of insurance is less than 7 to 8% in urban areas, and probably 2 to 3% in rural areas. That's my off-the-cuff opinion, but you can have a differential, but it's not likely to be more than 10% in most of the areas. And that is where we need to invest. And if we start investing in that at an early stage of our life, that would help us in a long term in taking care of these factors. But as even you look at it should be compared with other diseases, for example. Now look at rheumatoid arthritis, or look at any other immunological disorder, and see the amount of recurring cost a person is incurring every 2 weeks for months to years. And therefore, we are talking here of only one-time cost of an ICD. So its cost is how you look at it. And I could not agree with Dr. Vinita more, that if you look at the impact ICD has on survival, it is a very, very small price to pay for life.
Thank you, sir. Coming from you, it is really great. It's really nice.
We have another question. When should ICD be placed in ischemic heart disease patients? After 40 days or after 18 months?
So this,
Dr. Bali, sir?
Not less than 40 days. So less than 40 days, it is out. Beyond 40 days or beyond 90 days of revascularization, and we should, I believe that we should start advising to the patient and every visit we see in the clinic, and explain the utility and long-term effectiveness of ICD. As I said, the benefit starts becoming manifest about 18 months after an acute event. So there is early time we know when not to implant, but there is no late date. It can be any time after 40 days. If ejection fraction is low, we should be able to implant. Even in those people who have chronic coronary artery disease and have a stable left ventricle ejection fraction of 28 to 30, most of the people would keep on repeating the same medicine, waiting, which Dr. Vinita very rightly pointed out, that it takes one event for the person to die, and there is a 1 in 10 chances that we may be able to save it. So we should not be waiting for that one episode. So if you have a chronic ischemic cardiomyopathy, ejection fraction less than 35, stable patient coming regularly for follow-up, please strongly advise him for him an ICD. It is not a day too early in a stable patient, but yes, less than 40 days or less than 90 days beyond revascularization is, for all practical purposes, a no-no.
Dr. Vanita, Dr. Raman sir has a question. LV dysfunction, broad QRS, left bundle branch block. What is the preferred CRT-D or simple AICD?
doing ICD in patients who has a left bundle branch block with LV dysfunction is actually a crime. It should never be done. You always have to give a CRT-T in case ejection fraction is 35% or more, and CRT-D in case ejection fraction is 30% or less. Now there comes a group of patient here where there is ischemic cardiomyopathy, where actually you do not have a typical left bundle branch block, but you have a Q pattern or you have a IVCD or a left bundle branch type pattern. Now there we can discuss whether we have to give CRTD or we have to give hot CRTD, which is the new thing which is coming up. But ICD is nowhere indicated in these patients. It's a crime to do ICD in this patient.
Very well said. In fact, I very much agree. In this regard, see, there is data to show this was best studied in the companion trial, where one subgroup received only medical therapy, the other received CRT-P, and the third group received CRT-D. So there was a significant survival benefit in the CRT-P arm as well. So CRT-D gave extra survival benefit. The benefit was about 25% in CRT-P and about 36% in CRT-D. So there was some extra survival benefit, which wasn't actually significantly different if non-ischemic cardiomyopathy was taken. So definitely, if there is left bundle branch block with severe LV dysfunction, CRT is a must. And if there is CAD, ICD is in addition. It is CRT-D, but not CRT alone. And I think that is very, very clear. That CRT is actually changing his prognosis, survival, functional class, everything.
Okay. Dr. Virender has a question. What should be the medical management?
I'll beg leave, Dr. Pawan, Dr. Vanita, Dr. Bali. It's 6:30. I have to be elsewhere in another session. I'll beg leave. So please continue. And thanks.
Dr. Vanita, you want to put the question first? Dr. Arun is leaving now. You want to put the question?
Arun is escaping, so how do I ask him the question?
No, just a matter of 5 minutes. You can just ask the question.
2 minutes. Okay, 5 minutes.
Okay. So I have a question which I have placed on my screen. It is a 58-year-old male. And please let me be clear. I'm asking you three because you people do intervention as well as devices. So you are doing intervention cardiology very passionately as well as doing a part of the electrophysiology also. So I want to understand the concept, what goes on as the thought process when treating a patient. So this is a 58-year-old male, diabetic, hypertensive, occasional smoker who had chest pain from last 2-3 days. He was not thrombolized and he presented to the emergency where his echo done showed an ejection fraction of 28% with a regional wall motion abnormality in the LAD territory with akinetic apex septum as well as the lateral wall. There was a probability of a clot at the apex as the echocardiographer said. This was the presenting ECG of the patient. The ECG did show a right bundle branch block. There was an axis change. The QRS was wide. PR is around 200 milliseconds. Now, how do you proceed forward with this patient? Dr. Arun, you can just answer and then go to your next.
Okay.
I want individual answers from all three of you. I want individual answers from all three of you. How will you treat your patient?
So when Dr. Arun, so when Dr. Arun will be answering, we have to close our ears.
No, that's okay. You are supposed to give your own opinion.
Okay.
You don't need to close your ears. I'm going to talk about only standard things. You are all extremely experienced cardiologists, so there will not be much difference. But see, if the patient has come 2 to 3 days after an MI and his EF is less than 30%, he is likely to be in failure. So I would initially start him on medical management and see what is his chest pain like. At this stage, there can be ischemic chest pain, or there can also be chest pain due to pericarditis. This patient could also be having chest pain due to that. So I would like to take a good history. If I believe this is ischemic chest pain and which is, a definite documented ischemic chest pain, then I could consider taking him immediately for an angiogram and depending upon the anatomy, consider revascularization. However, if I am not convinced about this being ischemic chest pain, the patient is hemodynamically stable, I would still do his coronary angiogram and then look at the coronary arteries. If there is only a single, yes, this is what I expected, the LAD to be 100% blocked, the circumflex is normal, it looks very clean, so probably the RCA is also normal. So Vanita is smiling very naughtily. So I would look at viability assessment at this stage. Because see the OAT trial and there are several trials which tell us that if it's 3 days after a complete occlusion of one artery and no filling of the vessel from anywhere else, if 3 days have elapsed, then probably that area is totally damaged and you are not likely to get any significant benefit. Though there is some data to suggest electrical stability while opening up the vessel, but there is no good data to show any survival benefit. So this patient has a very proximal post-ostial occlusion of the LAD. If I'm not clear about the ischemia, I would like to check for viability and only then consider this patient for revascularization. So presuming that it is viable, one would of course open up and then follow the patient on all the good medical management for 3 months or so. If this patient doesn't have any VT, at that stage, evaluate the LV function and consider for options ahead. If on the other hand, this territory is not viable, I would manage this patient medically, do the best possible drug management to get his LV function improved, review at 6 weeks, look at the LV function again and then decide as per what has been the discussion today. So that would be my general approach.
Dr. Suri?
Yeah, you just go to the previous slide. No, thank you, Dr. Varun sir. Thank you very much for taking out your time. Thank you very much, sir. Obliged and regards.
Thanks,
Okay,
Arun.
and thank you, Pawan. Bye,
Obliged and
Vanita,
regards, sir.
and thank you,
Thank you.
sir.
Thank you.
Thanks for the excellent time that we spent, and thanks to all the listeners and to St. Jude guys for having us here,
Thank you, Dr.
giving us an opportunity to meet in COVID times. Bye, sir.
Exactly. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Chopra.
Thank you. Dr. Vanita, you go to the previous. You shouldn't have shown an angio actually before me and Bali sir would have opined upon your case, because you have shown the angio and I feel you have now we are biased. Now our opinion will be biased.
It is.
If I take out from the clinical point of view, if I take out that slide where you have shown the LAD 100%, I am not considering that. Now we know what is there, but I'm not considering that. Keeping the scenario what you have presented, 58-year-old male, diabetic, hypertensive, chest pain for 2 to 3 days, ejection fraction 28%, and akinetic area anterior wall, and there's a suspicion of clot at the apex. So what I will do in this patient, first of all, I will do and seeing an ECG, it is a new onset right bundle branch block. So, but if we see to this ECG, there are no significant signs of acute event in this ECG. So I will do the enzyme biochemical analysis of this patient. I will go for the TROP-I and TROP-T, and if it comes positive, then I will just consider doing an angiogram. If the TROP-I or TROP-T it comes negative, that means that the patient might have a chest pain. He must be feeling the chest pain for 2 or 3 days, but his MI or whatever event he has suffered, it is more than 7 days. So in that scenario, I will wait for the time, stabilize the patient, get his stress testing done, and then I will go for the further intervention. But if the TROP-I comes positive, then in any case we have to take him for an angiogram. And if the scenario comes like 100% LAD, irrespective of whether it is akinetic or not, in that scenario I will open the vessel. The only apprehension I have in this patient is that there is a suspicion of clot at the apex. So we have to keep in consideration that also. What happens actually when you are opening the vessel, and if this akinetic or the hypokinetic segment, there is a sharp contractility, the clot may dislodge and it may go into the carotid circulation, it will produce a catastrophe. So we have to keep that thing in consideration. And once we have opened the vessel and put the stent, the patient is already on the dual antiplatelet therapy, and putting that patient on the anticoagulation, the chance of bleeding are very high. So this is a very tricky patient, and guidelines, guidelines, whatever the guidelines say, I feel the guidelines are like the religious books. We read them, but we have to, when we implement them, we have to see the person whom we are treating. So this individual approach will be different. The guidelines will be different in this, but this is a more of a, a case presentation of a patient where the opinions may differ, and it depends upon the clinician who treats this patient, how he wants to go ahead with that. So depending upon the positivity of the enzymes or the negativity, that I will choose the track accordingly. As Dr. Bali sir will guide us, and 100% I'm going to follow Dr. Bali only. There's no doubt about it.
I think both of you have put it very, very succinctly. And there must be some catch where Dr. Vanita is asking.
Yeah, that's why
Most of the data which we interventionists follow is the O trial, which says that if beyond 72 hours, if the artery is occluded, then there is actually class 3 indication, because you may be actually doing harm to the patient. There is only one study, which is BRAVE 2 study. It's a small study of about 335 patients from Europe, which had looked at the radionuclide salvage of myocardium in late presentation of myocardial infarction. And it had shown that there is no mortality benefit. The only thing is there is some improvement in the salvage of the area. So how we would go about is what Dr. Arun and Dr. Pawan showed us. The only thing is I would be a little inclined to do an angiography early, because chest pain, what you have mentioned is that the patient is having chest pain for the last 2 to 3 days. There is a difference between patient having chest pain 3 days back and patient having chest pain 2 to 3 for the last 2 to 3 days. So if it's chest pain 3 days back or 2 days back, then we're talking of a completed myocardial infarction. If you are having chest pain recurrent for the last 72 hours, then we may be talking of a stuttering myocardial infarction. So I would like to look at the angiogram. If the angiogram shows what you have shown us, I would still like to go for a viability study. And depending on what the viability shows, if viability shows nothing in that, then we need to manage such patients on medical treatment. But it is not very uncommon, because RCA is clean, what we presume, and circumflex is complete, that it may be thrombotic occlusion. And thrombotic occlusion can be stuttering as well. So it is if a chest pain is occurring, it is occurring from somewhere. And therefore, viability is the most important component which we will be interested in. Early angiography, viability study, depending on viability, revascularization, if the LV myocardium is viable. If not viable, we leave it. There was a time when we used to believe in patent artery hypothesis, especially in the LAD, with myocardial remodeling being better than that. I think that theory has not been held true by evaluation. So I would go by early angiography and revascularization, depending on the vascularization strategy. Most likely, what you have shown us, and it is a non-viable area, just leave it. Manage medical treatment. Reevaluate after 6 weeks. Ejection fraction is low. Consider what we discussed today.
Thank you so much, sir. It has been a combined opinion of you three to look at the viability. I want to just put in a couple of questions that were there in my mind. First of all, we have looked at the echo. The echo shows that there is akinetic area, and the presence of clot in itself is a akinetic area. You will not have a clot in a hypokinetic area. If there is a clot present, that means that is developing, the remodeling of the LV has already started, and it is going towards the dyskinetic side. Secondly, the ECG presentation, as you have said, there is a fresh right bundle branch block with axis change, with PI prolongation, and you look at the QRS, it is so fragmented. It is almost that every lead has a notch there, which shows that there is a scar, there is a huge area of scar there. So in such a presence of the spectrum of things which is happening, in a 58-year-old, I agree, angiography is warranted, which you all three said that you will be doing it. And probably before doing an angioplasty, I would say viability study, as you rightly said, sir, was to be done to assess whether that myocardium is even alive or not. Because in case angioplasty is done like this in such patients, I think these fit into a group where there's a huge amount of scar. And this patient, even if we send them back home after opening the vessel, being happy that LAD is flowing very nicely, right bundle branch block, PR prolongation with such fragmentation on the scar, ejection fraction 28%. I don't think so. There is much chance that the patient will come back for an ICD or for anything else. The chances of having arrhythmias in such patient is actually very high. So I don't know which way you are going, whether deciding about doing an angioplasty at the moment, or just because there is a thrombotic lesion which needs to be opened, is a right decision. I don't know.
No, I don't think anybody of three of us said that go ahead and open this.
Exactly.
Agreed. No, I'm just showing you the pictures as the case has gone.
Exactly.
Let me know.
I agree.
But none of you even insisted on the part that the scar area is very huge. And
Let me complete it.
Yes, sir. Please, sir.
First and foremost is when a patient is having chest pain after completed infarction, then we must be knowing about what is happening to his other two arteries.
Correct.
That we will only know by coronary angiography. So we need early coronary angiography. I would not go for a viability study before doing a coronary angiography. We do a coronary angiography, we find a totally occluded vessel, we do a viability study and then proceed forward. As far as the soft indicators are concerned of akinetic apex, fragmented ECG, RBB area, and clot formation in the apex, these are all relative indicators. None of these indicators in the first 6 weeks indicates a dead myocardium. You can have a stunned myocardium, you can have a hibernating myocardium. Hibernating myocardium, akinetic, is very well described.
Yes, sir.
So I would not go by any of these three criteria. They are leads for me to understand that most probably this myocardium is dead, but I would need a viability study, a PET scan, to see whether it is viable or not viable. Because this is a very important artery. And if the myocardium is viable and we are dealing with hibernating stunned myocardium, then we need to open that artery. And as I said, BRAVE 2 trial did show that the myocardium salvage is increased in such patient. So my opinion would be based on angiographic finding and on viability study rather than non-invasive evaluation of presence of a clot, akinetic apex, and a fragmented ECG. Those are indicators, not conclusive evidence for me to leave that patient there.
Yeah, I totally,
agree with you, sir.
Dr. Bali sir has rightly said, and in fact, as I said that we should go for the biochemical analysis, the cardiac markers in this patient, and if the tropi comes positive, I will take this patient in the cath lab. And many a times we have seen, Dr. Bali sir will, he has a huge experience. Many a times we have seen in the cath lab, when we open the vessel, on the table only we can, by the flow of the dye in the vessel, in that particular vessel, we can make out whether this area, the area that is being supplied by the culprit artery, is akinetic, is dead or not. Seeing the picture what you have shown after the LAD, I feel his ejection fraction must have improved after opening the vessel. There's no doubt about it. Because many a times we see in the cath lab the type of flow we get, the type of vessel that gets opened up, the brisk flow, the TIMI3 flow, and the way the myocardium contracts on the screen, where you can make out these are the relative indicators which can tell you that yes, this patient is going to have a good viability. We have seen the patients having an ejection fraction of 20%. Totally, the myocardium is not moving at all. You just take him in the cath lab. If he is hemodynamically stable, open the vessel, and after 6 weeks, 2 months, you repeat an echo, and you find his ejection fraction has improved markedly. So there are situations where you can have an akinetic area, or where you can have a severely hypokinetic area on an echo. And the more important thing is that you have to see for the thickness of the myocardium. If the thickness is maintained, and even if it is severely hypokinetic or akinetic, chances are there that the patient will be benefited by the revascularization, and the arrhythmias will definitely be decreased. Sir, we have.
I would just say here that I would agree with Dr. Bali here 100%, that I would do an angiography, of course, to assess what is the status of the coronary artery disease. But before proceeding in, even if it is a thrombotic lesion, before proceeding for angioplasty, I would do a viability study. I agree with Sir 101%. If there is no viability, there is no point in opening up the vessel. But if there is a viability study, if that comes positive, I would open the vessel.
I have a slight, because you mentioned Dr. Bali's name, so I can't say I have a difference of opinion. But still, I have my way is that if the chest pain is up to 2 or 3 days, I don't feel we should do much for the viability. We should go ahead and open the vessel.
You're thinking like an intervention cardiologist, Dr. Suri.
No. I'm just balancing the things out.
No, you are not. I am doing the balancing part. It's just got transferred to me.
We have few questions more. I feel we should be very quick and conclude that.
Yes,
we have
45.
Dr. Vrinder. He asks about what should be the medical management to prolong the survival in financially constrained population. Again, he's concerned. My dear friend, he's working in Delhi only. He has been he's been my resident when I was in Apollo. A nice guy. So he has again the same concern. My friends, my juniors and my colleagues, they have a same concern about the patients. They can't afford it. But you people, Dr. Bali said, Dr. Vanita, you have a different approach. The life is very important. But for some people, it matters. And that's why, again, I'm getting the same question. What should be the medical management? Yes, sir.
In 1992, I wrote an editorial where the question in an international journal, where Opai was the editor of that journal, which the question asked was, is it viable, practicable, cost effective to treat hypertension in India? I'm talking of 1992. And when we talk of cost, we need to look at multiple factors. Cost of medicine is only one of them. We have to take into consideration the investigation required, the recurrent visit required to the hospital, recurrent hospitalization required, investigations multiple times required, electrolytes being monitored, and we need to do the daily economic loss to the family. If we comprehensively look at the cost over a period of time, I would say that if dapagliflozin is not used, if ARNI is not used, a generic ACE inhibitor is used, and a generic beta blocker is used, and a generic melanocorticoid is used, and you put an ICD, it will be much cheaper on the long term, more cost effective. We need to look at cost in a more comprehensive view rather than only as one-time cost of ICD.
Very well said, sir.
So, sir, point well taken, and Dr. Vrinder and Dr. Vikram. So, point well taken. You have to convince the patient, you have to convince the attendants about the necessity of ICD therapy, and once you put it, you have to tell them that it is going to reduce your, the economic burden. It is going to reduce because you will be carrying less expensive medications, and this has definitely a mortality benefit as well. So point well taken, and well forwarded too. So Dr. Amit, hello Dr. Amit Jain. Many patients with non-ischemic cardiomyopathy improves over a period of more than 6 months or say a year rather than 90 days. Should we wait for such a long period or not? Who is going to take Dr. Arun's question? Should we wait for such patients?
So may I try?
Yeah.
So in non-ischemic cardiomyopathy, Dr. Amit, you have to decide first and foremost whether it is myocarditis, because it is acute myocarditis which improves. If the patient has already gone into cardiomyopathy, then these patients are unlikely to improve within 6 to 8 months. For myocarditis, LV dysfunction patients, you have to wait for 6 months. 30% of these patients will have the same LV dysfunction. 30% will improve without a scar, and 30% will improve with some amount of scar, but ejection fraction will improve. This is how the natural history of myocarditis goes in. Once you have taken over that period, after that, in case it is a non-ischemic cardiomyopathy with LV dysfunction, then medical therapy is not going to benefit so much as it does for myocarditis. It is not going to be a substantial improvement in ejection fraction. So there you have to make a judgment call. In case it is non-ischemic cardiomyopathy and the ejection fraction stays to be after 3 months also, once you've established the acute myocarditis phase is over, and after 3 months the ejection fraction stays to be less than 30%, then you have to start thinking about the ICD part. And medical therapy, of course, has to go on. Sir, would you like to add anything?
Dr. Bali,
Dr.
sir,
Suri, you would like to add?
No, I think it's. I agree completely. We must wait for 6 months before we take a decision.
So Dr. Chawla sir, great job. Dr. Bali sir, as usual. It is Dr. Raman sir. He's asking me to tell you, Dr. Bali sir, great job. Dr. Chopra, Dr. Vanita, and as usual, well done, Dr. Suri. मेरे लिए भी बोल रहे हैं sir. Thank you very much, Dr. Chawla. I love you. Dr. Vanita, can patient with ICD play football? Because you have shown in your video that that player had already an ICD in place. So can patient with ICD play football or do strenuous physical activity?
The footballer that I showed actually had a genetic cardiomyopathy. That's why he was given an ICD to prevent a sudden cardiac death. Generally, in case we implant a device, our instructions to the patients are that they should not go into physical sports, which means like boxing or sorry,
Rugby. Yes.
rugby, where you are physically somebody is handling you. Football may be played, but the direct impact on the device on the chest of the patient has to be avoided, because that can lead on to hematoma or lead fractures, and then it can be a problem for the patient. Strenuous exercise, in case patient has LV dysfunction, we discourage strenuous exercises like weightlifting and all, but treadmill can be done, walk can be done in these patients even with an ICD.
Dr. Madan Mohan says thanks to Dr. Bali and Dr. Arun sir. Thank you. Dr. Sikka has a very pertinent and a very practical question. In Indian patients, anemia is one of the factors in heart failure patients. Please correct and repeat ejection fraction before planning for ICD. So I feel there's a nice suggestion.
I think as we were having this discussion, we have a PGI academic forum, which at the same time was discussing reversible components in patients with cardiogenic shock and ischemic heart disease. It is absolutely important to remember that anemia is important component for symptoms and for decompensation of heart failure, and it needs to be corrected. We have now very safe way of giving iron intravenously, which can take about 30 minutes to 1 hour, and we should take care of all these patients. It improves the oxygen carrying capacity. It builds iron stores, and iron stores are directly responsible for your fatigue and other symptoms which may be there in these patients. So iron is absolutely important. Hemoglobin correction is absolutely important. And in addition, other reversible components should also be taken care of. The point is very well taken, but most of the patients who come to us, they need, in addition to iron is a given. I don't think in the contemporary era, any cardiologist would not take care of iron deficiency in these patients. The question arises after iron correction of this, some symptoms are present, so we need to do. So it's a comprehensive management of the patient. We take care of revascularization, we take care of iron deficiency, we take care of reversible components, and then we see over a period of time how things go. So this is an ongoing, lifelong disease we are dealing with, and there would be some dips which would be reversible, and we should be aggressively looking at treating them.
Thank you, sir. And we have a last question by Dr. Chandraket. Role of alcohol septal ablation or surgical myomectomy in prevention of sudden cardiac death in hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. This is the last question, sir.
Dr. Vanita can take it, but before this question, I want to say that one area which we did not discuss today, arrhythmogenic right ventricular dysplasia.
Yeah,
it's an important disease entity, and we tend to miss it in the OPD unless we're specifically looking for it. MR is extremely useful for diagnosing this thing. It may be familial also, and we had a test player of UK who was supposed to go on and become the captain of England cricket team. He was diagnosed to have arrhythmogenic right ventricular dysplasia after playing 4 or 5 tests, and he retired. Today he is a selector there. So this is another disease which we should be aggressively looking at and treating it. Dr. Vanita can take up septal ablation.
Alcohol, septal ablation and surgical myomectomy in prevention of sudden cardiac death, they have said. We have some role of alcohol septal ablation, we have some role of surgical myomectomy, but that is to reduce LVOT gradient in hypertrophic obstructed cardiomyopathy. Both of these procedures have no role in preventing sudden cardiac death in patients of hypertrophic cardiomyopathy.
Okay, thanks. We have Dr. Seema, and she has a lot of appreciation for Dr. Vanita. Thought-provoking, Dr. Vanita. Thank you. And thank you, Bali sir. Thank you. So I feel our job is done. And I'm very thankful.
Dr. Pawan, you have managed this show extremely well. And I think it is because of your moderation that the questions are still going on. And that is, we wish you more success and keep on the good job. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Done a great job, sir.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. Bye. Okay, sir. Bye, sir.
Okay, ji, bye.
Thank you.
Bye, Dr. Suri.
Everyone be
Again, sir, Vanita ji.
हाँ जी सर. सर वनीता बोलेंगे तो बात करेंगे. वनीता जी नहीं. सर प्लीज. वनीता जी नहीं सर प्लीज.
So thank you. Thank you very much.
Is there anybody from Abbott there, please?
Yeah, ma'am. Shivendra.
Shivan, you want to say something?
Yeah, so thank you so much, everyone. I think it was a very insightful session, and we had a good discussion around a very important topic. So once again, I would like to thanks to all the panelists and moderator for making this very interesting.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you everyone.
Bye, sir.